I'm Anna, the Yarn Randomizer, and this is episode 7 of the Yarn Randomizer podcast. And I'm going to try to go through my script, but so welcome folks who've been watching. Welcome back. Thanks for continuing to watch, and those who are just stumbling across my little recordings and stuff, welcome. I hope you find something interesting or something that you like here, and I appreciate you showing up. So like and subscribe if you enjoy this, and we'll get right down to it. But really quick, you can find me on Instagram and Ravelry. I have the links below. I'm the Yarn Randomizer on Ravelry, and I am original.annasender on Instagram. And yeah, so we'll get right to it. All right. Oh, so quick, I want to do this as a quick reminder at the beginning of these videos, is that the reason for the Yarn Randomizer is I have a bucket of wooden chips with numbers on them, and those chips all correspond to yarns in my stash. And so for the vast majority of my knitting, I randomly pick yarns out of my stash and try to figure out something to do with it. So, and we'll be talking, most of the projects we talk about will be those projects. So for those who are new here. And so, so first is finished objects. And I think, yeah, I went ahead and posted it to Instagram. So if you're watching me on Instagram, you'll have already seen this. But I did finish my Lento. This is the first time I've done a Lento sweater. And it really, let's see if we can hold it back here. It really turned out absolutely beautiful. It's made with a Hypnotic, their sock yarn. And it was actually from a Yarnable box I got I think it was last year. And the mohair is Drops Kid Silk, which I got on a good deal from Wool Warehouse in the UK. And I'll link both of those below. But I wanted to show you. So I think it was about a 3/4, maybe a 5/8 sleeve and stuff. So basically what I did with this was I held together a fingering yarn and a mohair, and the length I made it, you can see along the edge there, is about 13 inches, which is about the length I like to come down to my hip. So I got it the length, and then checked to see, I divided the yarn in half after that and made the sleeves about as long as I could. So I think I just had this much left, about 4 grams left of the yarn. So I think I just about made the most of it. Might have been able to get a few more rows on each side, but this was close enough for comfort. Didn't want to get into a yarn chicken situation. And I had a good chunk of the brown mohair left over and stuff. And so all of that's documented in my stash and in the project as well. But this thing is unbelievably scrumptious. It just feels amazing. The mohair combined with the fingering yarn. And you can see I haven't woven in any ends yet. So some of the details of this is a folded over collar, if you've never done that before. And I love the appearance of them. And one of the big advantages is because there's no cast on or cast off edge here, is it's really amazingly stretchy. And one of the details I did on this was I used a cast off that's included with the with the ranunculus sweater. It's this little back and forth cast off that I use, and you can see it here, and you can see it on the bottom hem. It gives it kind of this rickrack kind of appearance, but gives it a reasonable amount of stretchiness too. You can see that in the cuffs. And so I was happy with that kind of finish. So the next steps for this are to weave in those ends and give it a block. I've put it on, and I have a reasonable amount of ease with it and stuff. But yeah, it's a little hot right now to be trying this on and wearing it for any extended period of time. But I have to say, absolutely thrilled. You can see I have a little bit of almost like stripiness and a little bit of flashing or pooling in the arms, and I'm okay with that. You know, I kind of expected that with a yarn like this, but it's just turned out so nice. With this Lento sweater, similar to a ranunculus, it's knit on a size, I think it calls for a size 10. I use 10.5 because I'm a tight knitter, but it produces, given the length of time this was on the needles, you could definitely finish this sweater in 1 to 2 weeks. I think if you really just dedicated to it, and excuse my sneezing dog down there, Odo. But it was really lovely. I think the only, not reservation, but only funkiness there was around, there are short rows in the back that give it a little extra length in the back, and you can see that in how that neck sits. And there's some funny alignment around these raglans with respect to how the pattern is written. Now I corrected it for my implementation, but I don't know if I wrote, I'll check if I wrote sufficient detail, but I think you have to keep an eye on that. They're using a knit in the front and back to do this raglan. And when you're going back and forth, and you're doing that knit front and back, it's one thing, but when they start back into the round, I think on one side of the sweater, if you did it the way it was written, they don't quite line up the way you would expect. And so you need to pay some attention to that. And I'll take another look at it and see if I can't draw that out and put some better notes in my project. But you'll find if you search on folks' projects, Lento projects, you'll find that comment in there pretty frequently. But otherwise, I highly recommend it. If you're not into having like open lace up here at the top and stuff, this is a great sweater. So a couple of skeins of fingering and sufficient mohair to go with it, and you've got yourself just a sweater with just an amazing drapiness to it and squishiness, good squish factor, and just fast and fun. It was really enjoyable to knit. I think somebody had asked me if I would show picking up the sleeves in this, and I think I have it here in my notes. Oh yes, and I use Suzanne Bryant's, and I'll link it in the notes below, her technique for picking up the sleeves, the armholes on these types of raglan sweaters. And I think that the only reason I didn't record it doing it on this one was between the mohair and the kind of 2 strands and, you know, the darkness of the mohair and everything. I don't think it was the most easy to see kind of pickup of a sleeve on a raglan. The next time I do a raglan project that's on something a little cleaner, a little easier to see, I'll be happy to record that. But bottom line is I'm using Suzanne Bryant's method for doing that, and her whole channel is great. She's got great techniques there, and this technique is a very good one. And so I'll get the ends woven in, I'll get this blocked, and I promise I'll wear it maybe at the beginning of the podcast and then take it off because it's the middle of summer here. But it turned out great, and highly recommend that pattern. All right, so aside from that, I have a handful of whips, and I have a dog with a squeaky toy. Oh no. Oh, I feel like such a heel taking this away from you. You see, he's got his little squirrel here. I'm going to toss it out there. You want to go get it? Okay, so next will be my works in progress. And let's see. Let me do a quick pause here. Okay, I'm back. All right, now works in progress. So this Lento sweater was Yarn Randomizer project number 2 for the year. It was the second yarn I picked this year. So the next ones are going to be a couple of shawls, not more shawls, just shawls. And this one is Yarn Randomizer project number 3. This was the third yarn that was picked out for the year. And so this is my swanky chic shawl. And if folks watching some of the other videos on the channel will see where I had to do a repair, where I had yanked out a whole kind of segment of stitches on this sweater. and it being lace and all, it was interesting to get that fixed. But this thing is getting quite long, and I'm very close. Oh, and don't tell me I'm in the middle of a row. Yep, I'm in the middle of a row. So I'm in the middle of the row using the latest color, this navy, with the main color that I have. But basically I'm taking a set of yarns that was from Les Garçons in 2021 that was their holiday from, I think, from Paris to Montreal, a yarn set, and I'm basically using all the little minis in there in combination with a it's a alpaca, it's a Surrey alpaca that they had. That's the gray fuzzy bands in here, and then the light colored yarn, which is a fingering from La Bien Amie, used in there as well. So it's a mix of yarns from Les Garçons and La Bien Amie, and they originally had a cow pattern, and I decided that I really wanted a shawl instead. So I found this pattern, which was originally written for 2 skeins of fingering and 1 of Surrey, and I'm using the minis and kind of mixing them in. So I think it's ended up being a good way to use up minis if you ever look at that pattern and try to apply it. And it's ended up, I think, longer than I thought it might get. And so we'll see how it finishes out. I've got 1 more contrasting color to do, so I'm about, I think, about 75 to 80% done with this project, and my goal is to have this off the needles for the next podcast. And it's a super easy knit, very simple. The lace is not complicated. It's a 2-row repeat, and it was pretty straightforward to fix when I made a mistake and everything, but looking forward to getting this one done and off the needles and ready to wear. So I expect that to happen next time. All right, the next project is my 4th. Okay, back after 1 more interruption. There you, thank you. Oh, that's a good boy. That's a good boy, yes. All right, okay, so next one is the hitchhiker shawl that I'm working on. And I am up to 36 teeth on this one, so I've got about 75% done. I'm keeping it tracking with the swanky chic, so I finish a part on that and do a tooth, and I've been working back and forth. And this one has been turning out really lovely. Look at that, how the grays, blacks, and reds and yellows are coming together. And I was kind of hoping it might produce a nice effect. I originally was planning to make socks out of this, but I'm glad I chose the hitchhiker. And I'm using a larger needle than I did on previous hitchhikers, and it's producing a much more squishy fabric, less dense. And I definitely have enough. I have a spreadsheet that lets me know what percentage you're complete. And so, I can't remember, it's so there's a good 50% mark, and if you have more than half your yarn left when you get to the halfway point, you'll be able to make all 42 teeth. So I'm going to see if I can make more, depending on where it ends up. But yeah, that one's ending up lovely and making progress there. And again, it's a great pattern. It's one of the most made patterns, I think, between that and Hermione's Everyday Socks. Those are a couple of the most done patterns on Ravelry, and they are for a reason. They're both really good patterns. All right. Next is that cat stuffy I am making for my sons to have for their cats. Now, I wanted to show you, I'll bring this piece over, but what I did was I finished the head, and I did not take it off the needles, but I knit the 2 layers together with a technique that I've used before, where I treat this like a double knitting layer, and I knit across the knit and purl kind of across the 2 layers to bind it together. So you can see that it comes together there. So I had to stuff it lightly because I only want this thing lightly stuffed. So I stuffed the head a little bit, and so that's in progress. So you can imagine each of these I'll sew down kind of a little triangle corner for the ear, and there'll be a face with a nose and a mouth right there, and now I'm knitting the body, which will be about 1.5 times as long as the head. And then I'll put some legs down there and pick up some arms on the side. But basically I'm kind of stuffing it as I go, because I'm trying to make this, as kind of a continuous piece as possible. Now, this technique of pinning 2 layers together in a way, sort of in a way you would with double knitting, I did with a hat that I made for my husband, I think it was last year. And this hat is a double knit, so there's 2 knitted layers here on this hat. But what I did was I cast on, and then after about, let's see if it can be seen, 2 inches of 2 inches of stockinette, I folded it back on itself, set it up for double knitting, but I attached the 2 layers together there. So you get a nice kind of defined, lightly defined brim kind of edge on the hat, which was what I was looking for. I didn't want this thing to keep coming kind of the edge to be kind of ill-defined. And so I wanted that kind of defined edge, and it ended up really nice. And this, I used a double knit hat pattern, but I took an existing hat and came up with the design that's on here, and kind of made up the decreases at the top. I wanted them to look sort of like seams. So that's a purl stitch running up each of those. But just as kind of a technique for kind of combining the 2 layers together is just, as you have those 2 layers on the same needle with the stitches intertwined, you knit one from the front, purl one from the back with the same yarn, and alternate like that across to pull the 2 layers together. That might be a standard double knitting technique, might be in a book somewhere, but I kind of just kind of, I say, was it Elizabeth Zimmerman would say, kind of invented that to do these kinds of kind of joins, because they're so neat. I mean, you can see that just comes together so tidily. Is that a word? I don't know. But it holds it together perfectly and stuff. So yeah, so that's making good progress. I think I will try. It's sort of like knitting a sock, and so I'll work on the body next. And that one part is where I'll put the catnip in a fabric bag, as well as a little bit of stuffing, and then go from there. So that's coming along nicely. Now, let's see now. The next one, so this is one of these things where after learning about Ann Hansen's patterns and attending that fiber retreat, and also seeing the yarns that her company Bare Naked Wools makes, and I'll link all of these below, I learned that they had their first mystery wool along last year, and they were having a new one this year. And this year it was a shawl. I didn't know all the details about last year, but I know somebody showed me a cowl. And again, cowls are okay. I'm not the biggest cowl fan in the world. I tend to like shawls better. But when I learned this year was a shawl, I decided I kind of decided I would do it, because I was really intrigued. I wanted to see more of these wools and everything. And so I have been working on, I'm in the midst of working on Clue 3. So, all of the yarn, as through Clue 2, all of the yarns have been revealed. And then right now I'm working on Clue 3, which was just released. And so if you don't want to be spoiled with respect to the pattern, I would say kind of skip ahead a little bit and stuff. I'll tell you when I'm not showing it anymore. But so far I'm about halfway through Clue 3 at this point, and I'm absolutely loving this shawl and the yarns that are going into it. So here is Clue 1 through partway through 3 there. And the term I kept forgetting last episode was this feather and fan term, which is this type of lace down here in the latest clue. But those colors and everything, it's just turning out so nice. And she has Zoom meetings where she explains, like, each of the, not only is the pattern a mystery, but the yarns are a mystery too. So each of these yarns, so far with a couple of episodes, we're 3 Zoom episodes into it. So for the first Zoom, she revealed what this yarn was, and this is made from a Jacob sheep. They are sheep that are two-colored, generally two-colored, and you can see the mix of the light color and the brown, the white and the brown there, producing this sort of marled yarn. I'll show you that in more detail in a minute. And she's also gone over this second yarn here, which is a Wensleydale sheep, not the cheese, but the sheep. And the Wensleydale is also what's in this first part of this, or actually the second part, excuse me. Yeah, I've just started using the Wensleydale again in this lace area. So we still have three more yarns that are going to be introduced, and that includes this gray, this lighter color here, and this cream color there. But it's been really fun to knit. And it has a sheepy, this is kind of minimally processed wool from smaller scale farms and stuff. And so it's got a much sheepier aroma to the yarn. So if you don't like that, you may not like these, but I enjoyed this a lot. So let me show you each of the yarns. So this is the triangle. They're also knitting a square, basically this same thing doubled into a square as well. And the type of design is called a hap, or a hap shawl. And she went into detail on that, explaining the history of those, and this is a modern interpretation of that type of shawl. And those shawls very typically have some of these bands of feather and fan lace kind of patterns in them, and these different colors like this. But yeah, it's been super enjoyable. Now the yarns, I've got almost none of the, is it just a tiny bit of the Jacob? Yes, there it is. Okay. So the Jacob sheep yarn, I just have a little bit left. And you can see that that's marled in terms of the different colors in the strands, but it's not like it's just two different color strands spun together. It's just the yarn, the wool itself is varying in color on those strands, and then the strands are plied together. Now, let's see, the second yarn is this one. This is the Wensleydale here, and this has a real smooth feel to it. Very nice to work with. The thing I'm really surprised about is how slickly this wool moves across my needles. I feel like it's more, it's just so easy to knit. It just slides right across the needles. And then, the other yarns we have yet to learn about. This is color C, which is this gray. And then this is color, my sloppy skeins here. This is color D, which is this kind of lighter brownish color, mushroom color. And then color E, which is this kind of traditional looking cream color yarn. And so we'll be finding out about those. In fact, there is a Zoom tonight, which I think we might be learning about the color C, or it might just be a chat. She's got this all defined in her schedule about which meetings we'll discuss our wool school and which ones are just chats and that kind of thing. But I'll link her channel below, and you can watch. I think she's got the first 2 Zoom meetings up, and she'll be putting the 3rd one up soon, I'm sure. And this is the 4th one meeting going along with this mystery wool along. But it's been a really fun experience, and I really highly recommend it. It's been a lot of fun. All right. So that's any of my other, I have a few other whips, but they're kind of in a holding pattern right now, so I'm not going to cover those this afternoon. And then we'll go next to Aquisitions. And so it actually was my birthday recently, and my husband, who typically doesn't buy me very yarny gifts, actually got me a sort of yarny gift this year. So as you know, I have my mom's dog, Odo, is here now. And so he got me this book, Sweaters for Dogs. And so I think there's about 15 patterns in here. And so we joked, I said I may try to make every pattern in the book if I can make it fit for him. And so, yeah, so a lot of really nice patterns in the book. And it's funny because I looked this, you can look up sources on Ravelry, and you can look up, this book is actually listed there. I'll link it below. But only one of the patterns in this book is actually, has a project associated with it. And so it's not well documented in Ravelry right now. But I think as I make some of these, I'll put more information as I make projects and associate that with the book on Ravelry. But that was a really nice little present from my husband. And that'll be fun. Knit some more. I've knit 2 sweaters for Odo. You'll see those in my projects. And he likes to wear them. And so I'll definitely be knitting some more of those. And today in the mail, I received the June shipment for the Jimmy Beans wool. And so for their annual shawl, so basically they send you a little 80 yard skein of yarn. And so now I'm trying to remember if this is which yarn this is, but it's a merino single, and I believe it is, let me take a look. Oh, it's picking a good time for an update there on that app. Let's see if I can get into it. I want to say this is La Bien Amie, but we'll find out. There we go, and let's go to my projects, and there it is right there. Yep, La Bien Amie merino singles. And so this is the latest colorway, which I think is Sierra, and it's a fade shawl, so there's some pictures of that. And each month they come with a little stitch marker, and this one is, and this is really going to be impossible to see. You might see it in the picture on my project, but it's basically a palette with a paintbrush there. And so you get a little stitch marker each month as well, along with the yarn. And so that I will be working on after I finish this month's clue for the, oh my goodness, that's still going. When I finish this month's clue for the wool along, I'll pick up that next. So now, since my notes have been hijacked by an update on my iPad, let's see if I can't get to them here. It's a conspiracy of technology here to stop me from looking at my notes, because I know I had one more acquisition I wanted to show. Oh, I know. I got it. I didn't even have to look up the notes. So one of my favorite sock designers is a person who does patterns for socks, and I think, I won't swear that 100%, but the vast majority of her patterns for socks are toe-up socks. Well, it turns out she is having a, and I'll have it here in my library, she's having a knit-along, and it is called, yeah, I'll stick up an image over here somewhere. It's called the Very Berry Mystery Knit-along. So it's a mystery sock. And they're going to release clues, and they're going to have a time frame they're going to do it over. And I've enjoyed her patterns so much that I thought I would go ahead and participate. And let's see, oops, yeah, that was the English version. So let's take a look. Download, open, and there. Let's see if this will work. There we go, upload, and now let's see if I can get back in there. I may edit a little bit of this out. Oh, there it is, good. All right, so this is a mystery knit-along called the Very Berry Mystery Knit-along, and she's got a schedule, clue 1 through clue 5, so it starts July 14th, and she's got in the initial clue 0 here, she's got information on gauge, on recommendations on the colorway, and some different ideas. So she's put a lot of effort into this. But I'm intrigued because I've liked her pattern so much. And so, thinking of the berry theme, let's see if I can find this. I know it's here. Ah, there it is. All right. So I was looking through my yarns and trying to see something that would be a nice berry color. And I think this, you can see that would do the trick. Now she recommended against a very highly variegated yarn, and she said like mildly speckled might work, but I think this sort of tonal, and it goes right along with the berry theme, I think will work well. And this will actually be covered in my, I'm getting ready to do my wool tour. And speaking of, we have to talk about something else, but related to the wool tour. But this is a fingering yarn that I have, and this is from Coats & Co. And they're an Ohio dyer. And I believe I got this skein of yarn as part of Jimmy Bean's Wool. They had a monthly sock yarn that they were doing in, I don't know if it's 2020 or 2021, and I think they sometimes start that in July, but I don't know if they've did it last year or this, and I don't know if they're doing it this year. But I really like this tonal yarn, and I think it'll do a great job with a pair of textured socks, which is what she's saying is what this mystery knit along is going to be like. So yeah, so that is another. I had this yarn, but I acquired the pattern for the mystery knit along, and I'll start that in July when the time frame comes up and work through those clues there. I think I'll try to knit them 2 at a time, and I'll cover that here. So there was that, and then, so the thing I wanted to talk about with yarn is, I think in all the time that I've had yarns and stuff, I really haven't had any trouble with moths. Now I've had a pantry moth situation I've been dealing with because I had some bird seed I brought into the house that had pantry moths in it. And I've been working to quell that, that business for a while. And I think I've just about got it beat. And they used to scare me a lot because they would come back here in my office and I'd see them flitting around and I'd go, is that a wool moth? No, it's a pantry moth most of the time. But then just in the past week, I saw a slightly smaller, lighter colored little moth flying around in here. And I said, ooh, I think that is definitely a wool moth. And so I store all of my stash in containers, and inside the containers, it's typically, I have it in gallon Ziploc bags. So everything's kind of sealed up for the most part. But I did have a lot of yarn sitting out, more recently acquired, and that kind of thing. So as soon as I saw that, it was kind of the alarms started going. And so I went around and sealed up all the yarns that I had. I sealed up my shawls and that kind of stuff. And I set out some traps for wool moths. And I have caught one, but I don't think I've caught any more. And I suspect that this came in with when I brought some yarn back from my mother's, and I suspect it rode in here on that yarn. Now, I didn't do something I normally do when I acquire yarn. Sometimes I buy yarn from other people on Ravelry, and anytime I do that, when I receive that yarn, I typically put it in the freezer for a couple of days. And I didn't do that with my mom's yarn, and I should have. I should have been more careful. So hopefully, just one was trapped so far. So it might have been just an initial introduction. But Stephanie Pearl McPhee recommends doing what she calls a stash toss twice a year in order to keep an eye out for moth problems. And as we do this yarn tour, that will be my way of doing a toss of the yarn to look for any problems there. So we'll work our way through it and see if there's any issues there. But I'm definitely taking some serious precautions as far as sealing up my yarns and making sure nothing can get in there, and using these are pheromone traps that kill the catching and the male moths, so that there's no reproduction that happens. So given some time, it should quell the issue here. But I'll definitely be keeping everything well sealed up, and I probably should go ahead and put my mom's yarn in the freezer. I actually haven't shown that as an acquisition yet, and I will set that up for showing next episode. All right, so now that's finished, and did I have anything else I wanted to go through? Oh, okay. So typically I will talk about the next Yarn Randomizer picks, but I haven't made any new picks yet because I'm kind of trying to get these shawls done, and I have a nice full queue right now of things to work on, a lot of them relatively small. So I think this time I'll work through some of those things on the queue, and I'll add some more to the queue. So there'll be some Yarn Randomizer, at least one Yarn Randomizer pick in the next week, and I'll do a short for when that happens. And my husband always gets to pull that chip out of the container. And then, oh, that was the one other thing. So I'm preparing to start, since I finished my lento, I'm getting ready to start another sweater. And so this is combining yarn that was picked up in my Yarn Randomizer. This is, do I write what the pick was here? No, I think this was, oh, I'll write it in the notes, but this was a work sock sport, I think, from Madeline Tosh, combined with the drops. I've got a gray mohair silk from them. And so this, even though this is called a sport weight yarn from Madeline Tosh, if you look at the yardage and you read about all the comments, it's really more DK-ish. And so I looked for a DK pattern that combined mohair and a DK yarn. And so I'm really happy with this swatch. And I use the technique of not needing to have knitting in the round without having strands across the back. That's in one of my little instructional videos. As it turns out, I knew somebody else had to have discovered that. And so it turns out in the Knit Stars, there's an author who goes through doing that technique as well. And so I knew I couldn't have been the only person who ever thought of this, but I do have a video on how to do it. So that way you don't have to worry about any restriction across the back, and you don't have to cut the yarn, so that if you want to reuse it from the swatch, you can. So that turned out really nice. I like the dappled gray. I think the two yarns go together, and this is going to be a novice slipover from Petite Knit. And so I plan to start that soon, but I still want to get a couple of those shawls off the needles first. And then I think the only other thing is coming soon. I should just call this section coming soon. So I did my last shawl retrospective, and you'll see that in my list of videos, and I'll link it below. And doing the stash tour, the first half of my sock yarn. And then I've got a make one left, make one right versus yarn over comparison in process. I will get that done and show that, as well as I want to do a comparison between a knit front and back and a knit front slip back, and show you how those two different increases look different. And I also finally got I think what will be a good tool for recording the browser, so I can show a couple of things about how I look for patterns, some tricks for looking for patterns for yarn on Ravelry, and for how I shop for yarn on Ravelry, because I have bought a good chunk of yarn from other people's, I shop other people's stashes regularly, and you'll find some really good yarns there. And so I want to show you how I go about that as well. But I think that's it for this time, and I hope you enjoyed it. If you did, please like and subscribe. It helps the channel. And I really love talking about these things. And if you have any questions, please go ahead and ask. I try to respond to every comment that comes in on my videos and everything. And I look forward to seeing you again, and enjoy your knits.